Hi, I'm glad you're here with me today to play with watercolor and different types of brushes to make simple stroke work motifs, flowers, berries, and leaves. And once we've learned to do that, we're going to learn to combine them into a pattern that is repeatable. Now, surface design seems to be pretty popular these days, and I think a lot of people, including myself, are fascinated by it. But this that we're going to do in this class, this is a very low-tech way to create a pattern that's repeatable over a piece of paper. You would not use this technique to create fabric, wallpaper, or other products that you can market. But what you can do is get a feel for the process itself and for how exciting it is to take your simple motifs, combine them, and see them repeated. And then, of course, if you want to work further on it, you can go ahead and proceed to something like Adobe Illustrator and really get into pattern design. But for now, we're going to learn how to make some simple motifs, how to combine them into a repeatable pattern, and then how to create that pattern over, or how to put that pattern over an entire sheet of paper. So let's get started. Really happy to be here with you today as we work together to paint some sweet little watercolor floral motifs. And this will be the first part of this course, learning to paint the motifs. And then the second part will be putting them together and using them to create a repeat pattern the low-tech way. So I'm using watercolor, which is not the medium I usually use. I usually use acrylic, but I have so many beautiful colors of Daniel Smith watercolor that, you know, every once in a while I just have to get them out and play with them. Now, I said stroke work, and what that means is that you're using the shape of the brush to create a stroke that has a particular shape to it. And so I am going to be using 4 different kinds of brushes this morning. Now, it may be new to you to use a lot of different kinds of brushes, but it's a very useful tool to have. And I mean, to be able to use the different brushes and know when to use them and what kind of effects you can get from them. And I just want to say something first about the quality of the brushes. Now, people have this idea that quality brushes are really expensive. And it is true that there's a range of price for brushes, from pretty low, where they're basically not worth having, to pretty high, to who in the heck can afford them. But there are middle ground brushes that are really quite nice, and I've put 2 brands and where to get them in the PDF. A lot of people, when they're painting watercolor, want to use squirrel hair. I will not use animal hair brushes of any kind, and that's just my feeling about animals, that I don't like to use them in that way. But I use Golden Taklon synthetic brushes, and they're really good, I think. And once you make a relatively small investment in your brushes, if you treat them well, meaning washing them after you use them, you can get a lot of life out of them. Many of my brushes I've been using for more than 10 years. And this first one's an example. This is a liner brush, and you can see the hairs are long, and there aren't that many of them, so the stroke we're going to get is basically a very fine line. These 2 are flats, and as you can see, the tip of the brush is flat. This creates a squarish type of stroke, and the square end is called the chisel end, and you can use it like that to create a line, a thin line, or you can use it like this to create a thicker line. And they come in different sizes. These are both fairly small. A 6, well, these are both 6s, but one is older than the other, and you can see that as they get older, they kind of expand. And then this is a variation of a flat. This is a angled brush called, let's see, just called angled. And it's basically the same, for the same type of strokes as the flat, but it's a little easier to use because of the angle on it. You don't have to hold your brush this way. And then finally I have some rounds in various sizes, and you can see these are the newer ones with the really sharp point on them, and they're still in their little protective shields. And then these are older ones that don't look so pointy, but when you get them wet, they do look better. So those are the brushes that we're going to be using. And I'm going to start first with the leaves, which I think are a little easier to paint. So I have my little cheat sheets here, and you will recognize them from the PDF. So when you're using watercolor, the amount of water and the amount of pigment that you have in your brush matters. You want enough, you don't want your paint so watery that you don't basically have any color coming up with you. But you don't want it, wait, what did I say? You want just the right amount of pigment in it. Too much and it's very thick and maybe it doesn't flow off the brush as well as you would like. Too thin and you don't get much color at all. So I'm loading my brush, my flat brush, with a green and wiping off some excess. And then the way I'm going to paint this leaf is very simple. It's a simple one-stroke leaf. And I'm going to pull a diagonal stroke. And this top point is where I imagine the tip of the leaf is going to be. And I'll just put a little more color on it. And then I take the liner brush and pull a stem. So you notice I started inside the leaf and pulled out and let the pressure up. You can go the other way also. Whoops, that's what you have to be careful of. So this is so simple, it's almost silly. But then you can dress it up by taking another color and dipping it in while the first color is still wet. And you can dip it at the base or do another one here. That's too much water, I think. You can also drop color at the tip. And while that paint is still wet, the color is going to move around. You can also use a brush where you've dried most of the water off and pick up some color if you want. So it's just kind of fun to play around with it and see what kind of effects you get. There's nothing real controlled about it. It's going to do what it wants to do. You add more water and that encourages the paint to flow more. And this is a casual project, so we're not being really fussy about exactly what it's going to turn out to look like. Another thing you can do is you can make a little S stroke for a slightly different shaped leaf with the same brush. And you can even, if you want to, see if I can get this to work, just use the chisel edge of the brush to do the stem. So you can see dropping in other colors can give you some pretty fun effects. Okay, so that's it for the simple leaf with the square brush. Now the simple leaf with the round brush, pretty much doing the same thing. I'm taking my brush, I'm loading it up, get this color. I'm going to touch the tip to the paper, and this is going to be where the base of the leaf is, and then just sitting it down. And then I can take the brush to get the shape I want. There's enough paint on there that I think I can pull the stem out from what's already there. And I can dry off my brush, pull some paint out. So when you see me moving my brush off camera, I'm drying it on a paper towel. And then let's add a little other color in the bottom. Doesn't show very much, but yellow. Brighten up the bottom of that leaf. So we'll do one more. Let's make one of these, this color. Okay, so I'm tipping it down, touching it where the base is, laying the stroke down, and then just evening up the edge if I want to. I don't have to. You might notice that as you're pulling a stroke, the edge where the tip is going to be a lot cleaner line, and the edge where the tip is not is going to be a raggedier line. So there's another one. This one doesn't look too good. You can always fix it while the paint is still wet. And and the leaf gets bigger and bigger as you work. And sometimes it's kind of fun to have the leaf kind of falling down. When you pull the paint out of the middle, obviously you have a darker edge around the leaf, which can be kind of nice. Here, most of the color is up here, so I'm going to, just for the heck of it, take some color out down here. And let's see what happens if you blot it. Yeah, lighten it up like that. Oops, and I smeared that. Okay. So much for those. Okay, now I'm going to do a little lobed leaf, like so. And for that, I'm going to use, did I talk about the filberts? I'm not sure I talked about the filberts. Okay, so the filberts are basically flat brushes, but they have a curved tip instead of a flat tip. And that gives you a really nice little stroke. So I'm going to make a lobed leaf, and I'm going to start with the lobe at the top. And then I'm going to use my liner brush and make the stem so I know where I'm supposed to be working as I do the other lobes. So the top lobe is going to be the smallest, and he's going to be angled down. Bigger, and then smaller at the end. Bigger, bigger, and then the bottom lobe often is angled down a little bit. So I don't have much paint at the top, so I just put more in, and I take some out of the middle. I just really like that effect when you have more or less color in certain places. And then I can always add other color, which I think I will do. Pretty. So let's do the opposite in terms of color. We'll start with our blue, the top lobe. And by the way, you can't really see it, but I'm using a very light touch on my brush. I'm not pressing down at all. Just touching the paper. I think I'll switch to a different blue. Deeper blue. Maybe put a few more lobes on. And you can also see that I'm turning my paper as I work. There's no need to make it harder than it has to be. I'll blot it. Ooh. Now I've probably lost a lot of the water, the dampness on the paint, so this isn't going to maybe run or spread very much, but I can deal with that by putting some clean water next to where I put the paint, and it's going to move. Okay, so now I'm going to do a couple of compound leaves. And for these, I'm going to start by painting the stem. Or not, I don't know if you'd call it the stem. I guess it's the stem. And I'm going to start from the bottom, move up, and lighten. Oh, that was no good. I'm a little nervous. There, that's better. And then for the leaflets, I'm going to use my angle brush. And I'm going to start at the top and make a little angled stroke. And then for the next one to the side, I'm going to make a little angled stroke with a slight curve to it. Very slight little S. And you can see that somehow I've gotten more paint in the center of the brush. I don't know how I did that. So that left that little line there, which is kind of cool. And the other side, let's see, okay, just like that. Those two colors are really pretty together, I think. And I don't know, let's see, I think I might add some pink. Maybe right there. So you can see how it just makes nice little visual interest when you add some other colors in there. Let's do blue. Now there was an example where I didn't have enough water on my brush and it came out not a nice solid line, but pretty grainy. I could try and go over it, but I would probably mess up, so I don't think I'm going to. I'm just going to proceed to the leaflets. And we'll cover up some of that, the top of it for the top little leaf. So you can see what I mean about stroke work, because I'm just using one stroke of the brush to create the shape instead of kind of outlining it and then filling it in. And also you can kind of twist your brush as you go, get some pretty interesting shapes that way. It's pretty, I like that. I think maybe I'll leave that as it is with no more color in it. Now the final leaf that we're going to work on is a fern, and it's really just an extension of this compound leaf that we just did. So I think I'm going to, for whatever reason, I'm going to use maroon as my stem color, and there's a better, much better stem. Let's try that again just to show you. So what I'm doing, and this is kind of nerve-wracking to do, but you work with your whole arm, not with your hand. And it's a very light touch. Oh, I shouldn't have covered all that up. So, okay, so much for that. That's the beginning. Now we work on the little leaflets, and I'm going to use, what do I have here? I think I'm going to use a square. And just for fun, at the top, I'm going to start with lighter colors, and then I'm going to change my colors as I move down. Now, once again, it's an angled stroke. And I'll work down one side. Now, I'm not going to, said lighter, and then I go do a dark one. Well, that doesn't matter, really. Come down the other side. And I'm going to switch to a slightly bigger brush. Well, first I'm going to try something else. So one way to get a bigger leaf, and we want the leaves to get bigger as we go down the stem, is to press harder on the brush and open those hairs. But that's harder to do than just switching to a bigger brush, which is what I'm going to do now. Okay, don't do that. Do not. Try to load your brush evenly. Even though it's not the end of the world if you don't. You see where the maroon is kind of moving into the green. I like that. And there's a much lighter one, and this is all okay. There's a spring green one, and I'm going to switch back to my smaller brush because sometimes the fronds, or not the fronds, the little leaflets at the bottom of the stem get small again. Okay, so much for the fern. That's pretty. So even though as I went along, I was unhappy with some of the things, like getting the brush loaded unevenly up here, in the end, it makes kind of a nice look to have the whole, it's not all just even. It's more organic, I guess we could say. So I want to talk to you about loading the brush. So the way I made that mistake, if you want to call it that, was I just dipped the brush in the damp paint and then put it directly on the paper. But what you really should do is go back and forth a little bit on your palette, and that's going to even the paint load on the brush. See that? Nice and even. That's pretty too. Anyway, these different brushes can be a lot of fun to use. Okay. And that's what it looks like that when you're more relaxed. It looks like this when you're not relaxed. The final thing I want to do for the leaves is some grass. And for that, I need my liner brush, which is hidden under the palette, the paint palette. And all I'm going to do is make a bunch of stems. And they can crisscross. They can be different colors, but they should all be bending either one way or the other, not both ways. Then it would look like there's a big storm. We don't want a storm amongst our grass. And even though grasses don't actually branch, you could have them branching if you wanted to. It's probably good to not have as many as I have here. It's just a jumble. But one thing I wanted to show you is that where the stems cross, if the one underneath is wet, you're going to see the paint, like on that, kind of sliding up the other one that's damp. And that's a cool effect too. And then if you want seed heads, you just take your liner brush and just touch the very tip. And you have little seeds, sometimes messy seeds. Let's put one over here. See if I can do better. And I have the tip of the brush pointing away from the stem. And then I can also put some, in the same direction as the stem. And if you take your time, you might do a little better than I am. And what might also be fun is take a little darker color and dot it in there. So there you have it. Now, the ones that we did first are dry. So if we want to, we can take the liner brush and go back in and add some veins. So this one, for example. And with a liner brush, with any brush, I think, you You want to pull away from you. You want to be guiding the tip of the brush to follow where your hand is going. You can't paint like that. Well, you can, but it doesn't work out very well. See? A mess. So draw your brush behind to follow your hand. Especially with the liner brush and those long leaves. Long lines. That's about all I can do, I think. I don't have much pigment on my brush here. So that's it for leaves. You may find it frustrating if you haven't done stroke work before. Just keep practicing. There's a couple important things. One is how juicy the load is on your brush. You want it to be enough that it's going to leave paint everywhere you want it. If you have dry, it'll do this. Oops, that's too dry. It'll just skip along. Won't be a nice solid looking stroke. The one I have the most trouble with, oddly enough, is the big round plain leaf. Let's try that one. This one. So that one's better. The way I'm doing this is not really stroke work so much because I'm doing an outline and then filling the outline in. But I think that's okay. Do what you need to do to get the result you want. Okay, so yeah, it's a matter of practice, and it's also a matter of not being nervous and shaky and overly concerned. And also, I think we get more shaky the more pressure we put on the brush. So light pressure again, I think that's really important. I'll do one more of these. Where can I put it? Put it over here. I'm barely touching this, the paper. And one thing I could do, got that white spot. I took the paint off my brush. I've just got water. So just play and have fun. You may want to develop some motifs of your own, and you may, for our repeat pattern design, you may not want to use these. I said we were going to do flowers, so let's do flowers. Take a little break and then we'll do flowers.